Good morning, Alex and friends. I'm Grace. Today is Friday, May 16th, 2025, and you're listening to Alex's News. Riverside is looking at a high of 77.4 degrees today, with the low dipping to 57.3 tonight, making for some very pleasant conditions, perhaps perfect for an evening stroll. Coming up on Alex's News, we will be examining the profound and often life-threatening consequences that United States funding cuts are having on children across the globe, a story with truly global implications. Then, we shift our focus closer to home as we break down the important details surrounding California's contentious debate over freezing its building codes, exploring what the potential outcomes could mean for residents and future development within the state. All this and more, right here on Alex's News. Stay with us. Our top story this morning is a devastating humanitarian crisis unfolding globally, directly linked to severe funding cuts to U.S. foreign aid. For the details, we turn to our news reporter Ethan. Ethan, paint us the picture.
Grace, it is a grim one. Children are dying from malnutrition as a direct result of these cuts. ABC News, the Associated Press via the Gazette and Star Tribune, and analyses from Perplexity API all highlight the severity, especially in northeastern Nigeria.
And these cuts stem from where?
They are new policy decisions by the current Trump administration, which began its second term in January of this year. The target is the U.S. Agency for International Development, or USAID.
How drastic are we talking? And for those unfamiliar, what does USAID do?
USAID is our main government agency for civilian foreign aid. Think global health, food security, and disaster relief. The cuts are massive. The Gazette and the Star Tribune, reporting on Associated Press information, state the administration has cut more than 90% of USAID's foreign aid contracts and $60 billion in overall assistance. Perplexity API adds that President Trump's proposed budget for the 2026 fiscal year, which is still some time away, aims for a 47% cut to international programs from 2025 levels. That figure could even jump to an 84% reduction if certain previously approved funds are rescinded. It is a bitter pill to swallow when the medicine itself is being withheld.
What is the human impact, particularly in a place like northeastern Nigeria?
It is heartbreaking. ABC News shared a tragic story from Borno State infant twins suffering malnutrition. One died after a USAID-funded Mercy Corps nutrition program was abruptly cut. Before this, USAID was crucial, funding 50% of the therapeutic foods used globally to treat severe malnutrition, as ABC News and the Star Tribune reported. 40% of those supplies were actually U.S.-made.
So the absence of that support must be catastrophic.
Indeed. The projection, according to ABC News, the Star Tribune, and Perplexity API, is that 1 million children globally will miss necessary treatment for severe malnutrition. This could potentially lead to an additional 163,500 deaths annually. It is not just cutting corners, it is cutting lifelines.
How are other aid organizations coping with this void left by USAID?
They are overwhelmed, Grace. ABC News reports that organizations like Helen Keller International have had their programs terminated in multiple countries, including Nigeria. Mercy Corps has been forced to terminate 40 of its 62 U.S.-funded programs, which could affect 3.5 million people across various countries. Remaining facilities, such as those run by Intersos in Nigeria, are understaffed and struggling to cope.
Is this crisis limited to Nigeria, or are we seeing this impact elsewhere?
No, it is definitely not confined to Nigeria. ABC News also reports that Mozambique is facing severe humanitarian shortfalls due to these funding cuts. And according to a general summary from Perplexity API, the situation is exacerbated because other international donors, such as the European Union, are also reducing their aid. This stretches the resources of groups like UNICEF incredibly thin as they try to cover the gaps.
What is the response from affected governments and the broader international community to this dire situation?
The Nigerian government, as reported by ABC News, is now scrambling to find alternative funding to prevent the collapse of its health systems. The United Nations has issued a stark warning, also highlighted by ABC News, that vulnerable people deprived of this essential aid could resort to risky coping mechanisms, including potentially joining violent groups out of sheer desperation.
Given this direct link to U.S. policy changes, what, if anything, is the current U.S. administration or Congress doing to alleviate this crisis or restore any funding?
Disturbingly, Grace, as of today, May 16th, Perplexity API reports there are no specific legislative or executive actions detailed that the current U.S. administration or Congress has initiated or proposed to directly address this crisis. This includes no moves to restore funding to USAID or provide alternative support to the affected regions. In fact, the administration has notified Congress of its intent to permanently dissolve USAID. There are also reports, again from Perplexity API, of Secretary of State Marco Rubio being involved in cutting over 80% of USAID programs, and an ongoing foreign aid review was extended just last month in April.
So despite the dire outcomes and what you mentioned as widespread public outrage, with organizations like Oxfam even joining lawsuits to defend USAID, the administration is pressing on with these cuts?
That appears to be the current trajectory, according to Perplexity API. The movement is towards further dismantling foreign aid structures rather than reversing these devastating cuts.
A truly sobering situation, Ethan, with far-reaching and tragic consequences. Thank you for that comprehensive report on our first major story this morning.
You are welcome, Grace.
Now, for our second story this morning, we're turning our attention to California, where a heated debate is unfolding. The question at its core, could the secret to solving the state's stubborn housing affordability crisis be found within its own building codes? It's a complex issue, and here to help us unpack it is our news reporter, Chloe. Chloe, thanks for joining us.
Happy to be here, Grace. It's certainly a foundational question for the state.
So, Chloe, what's the main proposal on the table? I understand there's a specific bill causing quite a stir.
That's right. The focus is on Assembly Bill 306, or AB 306. According to reporting from LAist, which cited a Cal Matters piece, and information from Perplexity API, this bill proposes a moratorium. Essentially, it would freeze California's building code for new housing. This freeze would start on June 1, 2025, which is just 15 days from today, and last through at least June 1, 2031.
A 6-year freeze on building codes? That sounds significant. What's the thinking behind such a drastic measure?
Supporters like Assemblymember Nick Schultz argue it's a necessary step to tackle housing affordability. Their reasoning, as Perplexity API notes, is that constantly updating building standards adds to construction costs. They believe California's current code is already very stringent, and a pause would help stabilize and hopefully reduce these expenses. Perplexity API also highlights that some estimate recent code changes have added between $50,000 and $100,000 to the cost of a single-family home over the last 15 years. The idea is this moratorium would give the industry and local officials time to absorb the existing requirements.
So the goal is to put a stop to rising construction costs. Where does AB 306 stand legislatively right now?
As of today, May 16, 2025, Perplexity API reports that AB 306 has passed an Assembly committee. It was also amended back on March 5th of this year and is still making its way through the legislative process for the 2025 to 2026 session. It's important to note there are a couple of key exceptions to this proposed freeze. Any emergency health and safety updates would still be allowed, as would building standards related to home hardening, which are those measures to protect homes from wildfires, proposed by the Office of the State Fire Marshal.
It sounds like a straightforward attempt to control costs, but I imagine not everyone is on board with freezing the codes for 6 years.
You're absolutely right, Grace. There's considerable opposition. LAist, again referencing Cal Matters, and Perplexity API detail concerns from a range of groups including environmental advocates, renewable energy organizations, and construction unions. Their main worry is that freezing the code could seriously hinder progress on California's critical climate change goals and potentially compromise safety standards that these codes are designed to uphold. They feel it might be a case of throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
That's a significant counterpoint. Are there concerns that this freeze might block beneficial changes too?
Precisely. This is a major argument against the bill, highlighted by the Orange County Register and Perplexity API. They point out that a blanket freeze could inadvertently prevent the adoption of new building code standards or innovations that are specifically designed to reduce construction costs or improve long-term affordability. It's a bit ironic. A bill aiming for affordability might block new ways to achieve it.
Can you give us an example of such an innovation that might be stalled?
A prime example cited by the Orange County Register is a law passed in 2023. This law permits apartment buildings over 3 stories to be constructed with a single staircase instead of the previously mandated 2. This single staircase design is quite common outside the U.S. and could reduce construction costs for mid-sized apartment buildings by up to 13% without significantly increasing fire risk. It also allows for more efficient use of land. Pro-development advocates, as mentioned by the Orange County Register, are worried that AB 306 would halt the adoption of such cost-saving measures. Perplexity API confirms the current version of AB 306, and its amendments don't specifically include provisions for adopting new cost-saving innovations like this single staircase rule during the moratorium.
So the very measures that could make housing cheaper might be put on hold. What other criticisms are being leveled against AB 306?
Critics, including organizations like CALBO, which is the California Building Officials, and the ICC, or International Code Council, as cited by Perplexity API, argue that AB 306 could limit innovation across the board. They believe it might restrict the incorporation of new technologies and cost-saving materials. It could also hinder the ability of local authorities to adapt codes to their specific regional needs or adopt new standards that improve safety and reduce costs. There's also some uncertainty, as Perplexity API points out, whether updates to seismic provisions, which are crucial in earthquake-prone California, would be permissible under the health and safety exceptions.
That's a lot to consider. The Orange County Register also touched on the idea that some code changes, while adding upfront costs, might save money in the long run, correct?
Yes, that's a crucial nuance. While recent updates focusing on energy efficiency and electrification might increase initial building costs for developers, they can provide significant long-term energy savings for homeowners. This means lower utility bills, contributing to overall housing affordability in a different way. A freeze might prevent the adoption of even more effective energy codes that could lower these long-term costs. So it's a debate about short-term versus long-term financial benefits.
It seems the core issue is whether a blanket freeze is the right tool. Is there data to back up that specific approach?
According to Perplexity API, there's a lack of specific data to definitively support the idea that a blanket freeze, like the one AB 306 proposes, will achieve greater net housing affordability compared to a system that allows, or even fast-tracks, demonstrably cost-saving innovations. Many argue a more selective approach, allowing for the adoption of new standards proven to reduce costs while maintaining safety, might be a more effective strategy.
Before we wrap, Chloe, are there other legislative efforts underway to tackle housing affordability in California beyond just the building codes?
Yes, absolutely. It's important to remember that building code reform isn't the only avenue being explored. As mentioned by Palo Alto Online, reporting CalMatters headlines, and the Orange County Register, Governor Newsom has also supported bills aimed at speeding up construction by prioritizing housing projects over certain CEQA regulations. CEQA, for our viewers, is the California Environmental Quality Act, which can sometimes lead to lengthy review processes for new developments. Additionally, the Orange County Register mentions Assembly Bill 846, which aims to harmonize the definitions of, quote, affordable rent, end quote, with federal and state financing programs for affordable housing, potentially easing the development process under these programs.
So, AB 306 is one piece of a much larger puzzle. It really sounds like California is trying to build a better future for housing, but the blueprint is still under heavy debate. Chloe, thank you so much for breaking down this complex issue for us this morning.
My pleasure, Grace.
Here are some other headlines. In international news, a bronze statue of Melania Trump, created by American conceptual artist Brad Downey and located in her native Slovenia, was reported missing on May 15, 2025. Slovenian police are investigating after the statue was apparently chopped off at the ankles and carted away. This incident is the latest in a series of controversies surrounding public statues in Slovenia, including those of other notable figures like Donald Trump. Turning to domestic politics, Democrats are reportedly finding their efforts to focus on former President Trump overshadowed by questions regarding President Biden's mental acuity. Mr. Biden, who became the oldest U.S. president, has faced scrutiny over his cognitive abilities, amplified by special counsel Robert Hur's recent report on his handling of classified documents. Hur suggested Mr. Biden's memory appeared to have significant limitations, and characterized him as a, quote, sympathetic, well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory, a description disputed by White House lawyers and Vice President Kamala Harris as, quote, politically motivated. The report has fueled concerns among some Democratic officials about Mr. Biden's prospects for the 2024 election, while Republicans, including Senator Rick Scott, have called for his removal via the 25th Amendment. Mr. Biden's debate performances have also been scrutinized for perceived cognitive lapses. Meanwhile, recent policy moves by the Trump administration are causing worry among Afghan refugees in U.S. military towns and the Christian groups that assist them. The Department of Homeland Security, under Secretary Kristi Noem, announced it will revoke Temporary Protected Status, or TPS, for Afghan refugees starting July 12, 2025, asserting that improvements in Afghanistan's security justified the move. This policy shift reverses earlier protections extended by the Biden administration and comes alongside the Trump administration's continued indefinite refugee ban, which began in January 2025, allowing only limited exceptions, such as for a small group of white Afrikaner refugees from South Africa. Afghan refugees, many settled in U.S. military towns, now face the risk of deportation, and Christian aid groups have expressed deep concern, with some advocacy efforts seeking exemptions for Christian Afghans. In financial news affecting many Americans, older citizens are in the crosshairs as the U.S. Department of Education restarted collections on defaulted federal student loans on May 5, 2025, after nearly 5 years of pandemic-related relief. This includes the garnishment of Social Security benefits, potentially up to 15% of retirement or disability payments for those in default. While Supplemental Security Income, or SSI, is protected, the move impacts nearly 5.5 million people currently in default, with an additional 8 million expected to enter delinquency. In response to these changes, Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley, along with Senators Cory Booker and Elizabeth Warren, reintroduced the Ending Administrative Wage Garnishment Act of 2025, aiming to suspend garnishment as a tool for collecting student debt. And in Washington state, Democratic Representative Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez, who won in a Trump-leaning district, is reportedly facing an uprising from the left. Representing Washington's 3rd congressional district, which includes suburbs and rural areas, Gluesenkamp-Perez first won in 2022 and secured re-election in 2024 by focusing on local issues. However, her moderate stance in selective party line voting, aligning with her party about 75% of the time on partisan issues, could lead to criticism from more progressive Democrats, despite her success being seen as a potential blueprint for Democrats seeking to win in conservative-leaning districts. That's all we have for now. Today's episode was made by Alexander King, with Claude Sonnet 3.7, Gemini Pro 2.5 Experimental, Gemini Flash 2.0, Perplexity Sonar Pro, and Google Cloud Text-to-Speech. I hope you have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow, Alex.